My sister kicked me out of her wedding over a seat. She refused to let me sit with my husband because of her perfect seating chart. I stood up in the middle of the vows and left. I, a 34-year-old woman, have been struggling with whether I overreacted at my sister Jane's wedding last weekend, but the more I think about it, the more justified I feel. Still, my family is completely divided, and I need outside perspective. Some background. Jane, who's 29, has always been extremely particular about appearances and social status. She works as an event planner for wealthy clients in Boston and takes immense pride in creating picture-perfect occasions. When she got engaged to her now husband Marcus, who's 32, last year, she immediately launched into planning what she called her dream wedding, a black-tie affair at the Fairmont Copley Plaza with 250 guests. I was initially excited to be part of her big day, even though I wasn't chosen as a bridesmaid since she picked her college sorority sisters instead. My husband Tom, who's 35, and I gladly helped with various planning tasks over the past year, from addressing invitations to attending tastings. We even adjusted our summer vacation plans to accommodate her numerous pre-wedding events. The issue started 3 days before the wedding when Jane sent out the final seating chart. I was shocked to discover that Tom and I were seated at entirely different tables. He was placed with some of Marcus's work colleagues near the back, while I was seated at a table close to the wedding party with Jane's single friends from college. I immediately called Jane to ask about what I assumed was a mistake. She informed me that it wasn't an error. She had carefully curated each table to create perfect photo opportunities and ensure optimal social mixing. She explained that since Tom works in construction and isn't as polished in formal settings, she thought he would be more comfortable with the guys in the back. Meanwhile, she wanted me up front because I clean up well and would look better in the candid reception photos. I was furious. Tom and I have been married for 8 years. He may not come from money like Marcus, but he's one of the kindest, most hardworking people I know. He owns his own construction company and has bent over backwards helping Jane with free consultations for her various home renovation projects. The idea that he wasn't polished enough to sit with me at her wedding was incredibly insulting. I told Jane that Tom and I would need to be seated together. She refused, saying her seating chart was meticulously planned and that married couples don't always need to sit together at weddings. She accused me of trying to ruin her perfect vision and said I was being selfish for making such a big deal out of a few hours apart. The day of the wedding arrived. Tom and I decided to attend, hoping Jane might have reconsidered. She hadn't. During the ceremony, I kept thinking about how disrespected my husband was being. When it came time for the vows, where Jane and Marcus were promising to honor and cherish each other, something in me snapped. The hypocrisy of my sister preaching about marriage while deliberately separating me from my spouse hit me hard. I stood up in the middle of their vows, loudly enough that several people turned to look. I locked eyes with Jane, shook my head, and walked out. Tom followed me a moment later. We drove home in silence, both upset, but feeling like we couldn't let this level of disrespect slide. The fallout has been intense. Jane didn't continue with her vows for several minutes after I left, apparently crying about how I'd ruined her perfect day. My parents are furious, saying I should have just sat separately for a few hours to keep the peace. Some of our mutual friends think I made the right choice standing up for my marriage, while others say I could have handled it differently. I've received dozens of angry messages from Jane, calling me selfish and dramatic. She's demanding I pay her back for our plates at the reception, which we obviously didn't eat, and claiming I owe her for emotional damages. My parents are threatening to cut contact unless I apologize, but I feel like giving in would just enable Jane's controlling classist behavior. Tom says he would have sat separately if it meant avoiding this drama, but he appreciates that I stood up for him. I know my timing was dramatic, but I feel like Jane needed a wake-up call about how she treats people. Standing up during the vows wasn't planned. It was an emotional reaction to watching my sister promise to honor her marriage while deliberately disrespecting mine. So Reddit, am I the asshole for walking out during my sister's vows over a seating arrangement? Should I have just kept quiet and sat separately for one night? I can't tell anymore if I'm justified or if I let my emotions get the better of me. Something important to add, other married couples were seated together at the wedding. I later found out that the only couples who were separated were Tom and me and my cousin Amy and her husband, who also works in construction. The tables weren't even arranged by gender or relationship status. Jane literally just decided that certain people weren't fancy enough for the front tables. For those wondering, I did try to discuss this with Jane multiple times in the days leading up to the wedding. She either dismissed my concerns or turned her phone off. The morning of the wedding, she had her bridesmaids running interference, so no one could stress her out with last-minute changes. This has really blown up overnight, and I appreciate all the responses. To add some clarity, Tom has always been kind and respectful to Jane, and he's helped her with multiple home projects for free. There weren't any past incidents or drama between Tom and Jane's friends or family. The seating chart wasn't about keeping certain friend groups together. My table had people I'd never met before. Jane has always been status conscious, but this level of obvious classism is new. I'm reading all your comments and really appreciate the different perspectives. This has definitely been a wake-up call about my relationship with my sister going forward. Thanks for listening to Am I the A-Hole Reddit Stories. Please subscribe.